Have you ever wondered how to speak English when there's no one around to practice with? Today, I'm going to share the true story behind a very special diary, my English diary, where every word is not just written, but spoken straight from the heart. This is more than just learning English. It's a journey of transformation. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of it. Welcome to Kunzy Podcast English, your daily dose of inspiration and English empowerment. Part 1, When Silence Was My Only Friend. Have you ever felt like a stranger lost in the vibrant world of English, where everyone seems to speak freely, confidently, while you stand silently on the outside, like someone staring into a party they weren't invited to? No one speaks English with you. No friends, no teachers, no practice group, no one. It's as if the whole world moved on without you, and you're trapped inside a glass box, able to see and hear, but unable to touch. I've lived that feeling, and maybe you're living it right now. I know what it's like to open your mouth only to freeze out of fear. Fear of mispronouncing, fear of grammar mistakes, fear of being laughed at. That fear slowly grows until you stop trying to speak, stop wanting to speak, and eventually start believing that you can't speak. English stops being a language and becomes a locked door. Beautiful, but distant. And you, just someone standing outside of it, peeking in. But then, one quiet afternoon, no social media, no noise, no pressure, I sat alone in a small room when a thought crossed my mind. What if I try to say something? Even just one word. So I did. I spoke. Not loudly, not clearly, just a whisper. A simple English sentence that anyone knows. My name is. That's it, nothing more. But in that moment, it felt like something inside me awakened. I had just broken my own silence. I had done something I hadn't dared to do for years. I spoke English to myself. No one else heard it, but I did. And that was enough. I had begun. Even with no one to practice with, even completely alone. Silence was no longer something I feared. It became the first space where I could speak. A safe zone. A place free from judgment. And in that quiet, I practiced. Little by little. Day by day. Don't wait for the perfect environment to start speaking. Don't wait for a study buddy to open your mouth. Change doesn't start with a crowd or ideal conditions. It begins with a tiny moment, a whisper, a simple phrase, and a clear decision. I will speak, even if it's just to myself. That moment opens a new door in your mind where you realize you don't need anyone's permission to learn English. You just need to begin. Right now. Part 2. Talking to myself. Felt strange at first. Have you ever tried speaking English to yourself in front of a mirror? If you have, you know how bizarre it feels. If you haven't, imagine staring at your own reflection, then trying to say something as simple as, "How are you today?" But your mouth refuses to cooperate. Your tongue trips, and your voice, it doesn't even sound like you. It sounds weird. You feel weird, as if you're pretending to be someone you're not. And yet I didn't quit. Day after day, I stood there, talking, questioning, answering, out loud to no one but myself. What do I want today? Why am I feeling sad? These tiny conversations slowly became powerful moments. My voice, awkward at first, grew more confident. Not perfect, but real. I began to realize something. Progress isn't about impressing others. It's about daring to speak, even when no one's listening. There were no teachers correcting me, no friends laughing, no one to praise or judge. Just me, facing my own fear, fumbling through sentences, and choosing to continue. That silence, it became my training ground. That mirror, my first conversation partner. I used to think I needed someone else to help me grow. But the truth is, no one can conquer fear for you. No one can speak for you. Only you can give yourself that power. And it starts with the decision to speak, even if you're the only one who hears it. Part 3. I created my own English world at home. No one to speak English with? Fine. Not living in an English-speaking country? Doesn't matter. One day, I stopped waiting for the perfect environment, and I decided to build it myself. And I started from the simplest place, my room. I labeled everything around me in English: mirror, desk, clock, door. Every time I looked around, I saw those words. I didn't need to memorize them. They became part of my daily life, naturally. My home turned into my own personal classroom. Then I went further. I became my own English vlogger. I imagined holding a camera, narrating my day like I was on YouTube. Now I'm brushing my teeth. After that, I'll make some coffee. It felt silly at first, yes, but over time, it felt empowering. It was like living a second life, one where English was the default language of my world. I changed the language of my phone to English. Every notification, every app, every setting became a mini lesson. I wasn't studying anymore. I was living in English. And that shift, living with it, not just learning it, was what made the biggest difference. I realized something powerful. You don't need to find the right environment. You can create it. You don't have to travel across the world to surround yourself with English. You can start with your space, your phone, your habits. That's how I built my English world, one small change at a time. Part 4. My first English conversations with myself. English used to feel like a distant world. I stood outside quietly watching, hoping someone would invite me into the conversation. But no one came. No teachers, no friends, no environment. And then I realized something no one had ever told me. If no one speaks to me, maybe I should be the one to start. I began with a tiny sentence. "How are you today?" And then I replied, "I'm okay, just a bit nervous." Strange? Maybe. Silly? Perhaps. But it was the beginning of a space where English no longer felt like a school subject, but something alive, something mine. I imagined ordering coffee in New York, asking for directions in London, answering a job interview at Google. I asked myself questions, and I answered. Every day I talked to myself like I was my own best friend. And strangely, it worked. I started creating a spoken diary. Not writing, just speaking. Talking about my day, my feelings, my struggles and little victories. Each word felt like a small brick, slowly building my confidence. And that's when it hit me. No one can help you improve more than you. You are your best speaking partner. You don't need anyone to judge you. You don't need a score. All you need is to dare to speak, even in an empty room, even if you're alone, because every sentence you speak today is one step closer to the freedom you dream of tomorrow. Part 5. Mistakes and Magic. How I Got Better Alone. I used to believe that in order to be good at English, I had to speak it perfectly. No mistakes allowed. No wrong grammar, no mispronunciations. Just flawless English. Or silence. And for years, I chose silence. I studied vocabulary, read grammar rules, watched English videos, and listened to podcasts. But I rarely spoke. Because deep down, I was terrified. Terrified of getting it wrong, of sounding foolish, of embarrassing myself, even if no one else was around. I waited and waited for the day I'd be good enough to speak, not realizing that speaking is what would make me good. Then one day, it happened. I made a mistake. A simple one. She don't like coffee. I heard the words come out of my mouth and instantly regretted them. My face got hot. I felt the sting of shame. But instead of quitting, I paused. I looked at the sentence. I corrected myself. She doesn't like coffee. I said it again, and this time it felt better. Cleaner. More correct. Something shifted in me that day. I started keeping track of my mistakes. I wrote them down, put them on sticky notes, stuck them on my wall. I repeated them until they became second nature. I began to understand something no textbook ever taught me. My mistakes were helping me in ways perfection never could. Every time I said something wrong, I remembered it better. Every error carved itself into my mind like a lesson learned the hard way, the kind that sticks. Since I had no teacher to correct me, I became my own. I developed the habit of checking my speech, verifying phrases, listening carefully to how natives spoke, and adjusting. Slowly, I stopped needing validation. I stopped being afraid. I stopped hiding. I embraced my mistakes. I welcomed them because each one was a sign of growth, of progress, of courage. Mistakes became my teachers, not my enemies. They lit the path forward. Each time I stumbled, I stood up stronger. So if you're holding back because you're afraid of saying it wrong, hear this. No one gets fluent without falling. Every fluent speaker was once a beginner full of mistakes. And each mistake they made was a stepping stone toward mastery. Mistake, correction, memory, growth. That's not failure. That's magic. Part 6, Copying English Voices. Changed my fluency. I used to believe that to speak English fluently, I had to sound original, say something clever, unique, or truly me. But the more I tried to be original, the more I froze. My sentences were slow, awkward, lifeless. I hesitated too much, and then I discovered something surprisingly powerful. Before you can be original, you must first be a great copycat. So I opened YouTube. I found videos of native speakers, vlogs, interviews, scenes from movies, TED Talks, anything that caught my attention. I listened, and then I repeated. I didn't try to understand every word. I just mimicked. I copied their rhythm, their intonation, the way they paused, how they laughed at the end of a sentence. At first, I felt ridiculous, but the more I shadowed, the more I transformed. My voice started to loosen. I wasn't speaking English like I was translating from my native language anymore. I was speaking it as a flow, a rhythm, a feeling. My speed picked up, my hesitation faded. I called it smart copying, not mindless repetition, but training my mouth, ears, and brain to sync with the music of English. Every morning, I chose a short clip. I played it 3 or 4 times, shadowing it as closely as possible. Then I tried to say it without looking. I recorded myself, listened back, adjusted. I didn't have to wonder, is this correct? I already had the perfect native sample to follow. I realized something crucial. No one expects you to be original when you're just beginning. Language is passed down through repetition. Just like a child learns to speak by imitating their parents, I was learning by echoing. And from copying others, I slowly found my own voice, a natural, comfortable, and confident voice. Lesson learned. Don't be afraid to copy. Imitate first. Master the sound, the flow, the feeling, and soon you'll speak not just like them, but truly like yourself. Part 7. I kept a diary, then I spoke it aloud. There was a time when silence surrounded me. I wanted to speak English so badly, but there was no one around. No teachers, no classmates, no speaking clubs, not even a friend to text in English. Just me, the empty walls of my room, and my thoughts. I could hear English voices on YouTube, but I couldn't answer them. I could read books, but I couldn't have conversations. It felt like I was locked outside a world I desperately wanted to enter. And yet I didn't give up. I found something else. Something small, quiet, almost invisible but powerful. I found my diary. At first, it was just a simple notebook, nothing fancy. I opened it and began to write. 1 sentence, 2 sentences. That was all. They were basic, childlike, awkward. Today I am tired. I want to speak English better. I don't know what to say, but somehow those sentences became a mirror to my soul. They weren't just language practice. They were real feelings, real moments of my life, written in a language I barely knew but deeply loved. One night, while reading my diary, a strange idea whispered to me. What if I said these words out loud? What if I gave my thoughts a voice, even if it sounded broken or weird? My heart beat faster. I felt silly, but I closed my eyes and spoke, quietly at first. Then again, a little louder. Today I felt nervous, but I'm proud I didn't give up. My voice trembled, my accent was thick, but something inside me lit up. For the first time, I heard myself speak English, not in my mind, but in the air around me, and it felt alive. That night changed everything. Speaking those diary lines out loud made them more real than ever. I no longer wanted to just write, I wanted to express. So the next day, I skipped the pen. I stood in front of the mirror and started talking. I told the mirror what I ate for breakfast, what I planned for the afternoon, what I feared, what I dreamed. Sometimes I whispered, sometimes I laughed. Sometimes I paused mid-sentence, searching for words, making mistakes. But I kept going. No one was there to correct me, and that made it easier to be honest. No pressure, no fear. Just me and my raw, imperfect English. Eventually, it became a habit. I would walk around the house, narrating my actions. I would speak to my pillow, to the ceiling, to the plants. I would pretend I was being interviewed or giving a speech. And through it all, I wasn't just learning English. I was discovering my own voice. The voice that had been hiding inside, afraid of mistakes, waiting for permission to come out. That permission came from myself. You don't need a perfect sentence to start. You don't need a big audience to practice. All you need is one small moment of courage. Because when you speak out loud, even to no one, you shift something inside you. You start believing that your voice matters, and that belief is the first step toward fluency. Lesson learned. When you stop waiting for the perfect time, the perfect teacher, or the perfect words, and simply speak your thoughts out loud, you begin to live in the language. Not just study it, not just memorize it, but truly live it. And when that happens, your English is no longer just something you learn. It becomes part of who you are becoming. Part 8, the day I realized I was speaking English. It didn't happen with fireworks. There was no crowd cheering, no certificate handed to me, no teacher saying, "You've made it." It happened on an ordinary afternoon in an ordinary store while I was buying something small, maybe a bottle of water or a snack. I handed the item to the cashier. She scanned it, smiled, and asked, "Anything else?" Without thinking, I smiled back and said, "No, that's all. Thank you." Then I walked out, calm, normal, silent. But halfway down the street, I stopped. Wait, I had just spoken English. Not in my head, not rehearsed, not forced. It had just happened. No fear, no translation, no searching for the right words. It came out like a reflex. Natural, effortless. And in that moment, it hit me. This language I had been whispering to myself for months, this voice I had trained alone in the quiet corners of my day, had finally become part of me. I wasn't trying to speak English anymore. I was just speaking it. That small sentence in the store felt bigger than any vocabulary list I had memorized. It was proof. Proof that the hours of talking to myself, copying voices, making mistakes, and speaking my diary out loud had done something. All that silent work had ripened into a kind of fluency I didn't even notice was growing. Just like fruit doesn't ripen with noise, language blooms quietly, slowly, until one day you taste it. And it's sweet. I didn't need a test score to know I was improving. That one real-life moment was enough. It told me that I didn't need to be in a classroom or live abroad to gain confidence. I just needed consistency, patience, and belief. I needed to trust the process, even when the results were invisible. Because language is like water dripping on stone. You don't see the change every day, but one day the stone is smooth, and you realize something incredible has been happening all along. Lesson learned: true fluency doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives quietly in the middle of your routine when your brain stops trying and your voice simply flows. When you stop noticing you're speaking English, that's when you truly are. Part 9. Talking alone is not the end. It's the beginning. For a long time, I thought talking to myself in English was just a temporary phase, a stepping stone until I found someone to truly talk with. I believed one day I would graduate from it. That real conversations with real people would replace the silent monologues and imaginary dialogues I whispered alone in my room. But I was wrong. Even after I started speaking with others, even after I felt comfortable in real conversations, I kept talking to myself. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Talking alone became more than practice. It became a part of me, a place where I could be honest, fearless, and free. A space where I prepared my thoughts, explored my emotions, and experimented with my voice. Every solo conversation built an inner confidence that no classroom ever gave me. And that confidence didn't end when I stepped outside. It grew. It became my armor, my compass, my silent superpower. I noticed something change. Because I had spent so much time talking to myself, I was no longer afraid to speak up in group discussions. I didn't panic when I met native speakers. I didn't freeze during interviews. I had already faced the hardest part, my own doubts. Now I was just continuing the conversation, this time with the world listening. And slowly, people started listening not just to my English, but to my story. Sharing how I taught myself to speak, how I whispered into the dark until the words felt like mine, inspired others. Friends asked me how I improved. Strangers online said they thought talking alone was weird until they heard my story. Suddenly, I wasn't learning just for myself anymore. I was lighting a path for others too. And that's when I realized talking alone is not something you outgrow. It's something you grow from. It's not the end of the journey. It's the moment you begin becoming someone braver, bolder, and more alive in every language you choose to speak. Lesson learned. Speaking to yourself isn't a substitute for the outside world. It's the doorway into it. When you learn to talk to yourself with kindness, courage, and clarity, you don't just learn a language, you learn how to stand up for yourself. And that is the strongest voice you'll ever have. You are not alone. Your voice is with you. Your story lives inside you, and your journey has already begun at this very moment. Believe that every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to a stronger, more confident version of yourself. Thank you for joining Kunzy Podcast English. If you found this story helpful, please like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next inspiring episodes. See you in the upcoming podcasts.